Trump chose to do something this sudden, this impetuous, and this damaging.
The long-planned Turkish military operation in northeast Syria has been launched.
Like two kids in a lot, you gotta let them fight, then you pull them apart. But it was unconventional. But they fought for a few days, and it was pretty vicious.
This actually has to be the worst strategy to promote the channel. It's another episode of Mr. Mitchell covering a trending news story from 3 years ago. If you're new here, basically this series is looking at key events, not in any particular order, from the last 3 decades and looking at how it shapes our understanding of a potential Third World War. Last week we looked at the fall of Boris Yeltsin and the rise of Vladimir Putin, and this week's going to be all about how Trump's withdrawal from Syria damaged the Kurds and caused Turkey to divide NATO. And by the end of the video, you'll be ready for your World War III exam because you'll know all of this. Who the Kurds are in America's history of letting them down, why Trump withdrew from Syria, and how NATO responded to Turkey's occupation of Kurdish homeland. So essentially, the Kurds are a group who live in the Middle East but are culturally and ethnically different to Arabs. Now, in the First World War, they were under the control of the Ottoman Empire, but in exchange for independence, they aided the British in working against them in the Middle East. According to the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920, the Kurds were supposed to be independent. However, Turkish General Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who had earlier repelled the Anzacs at Gallipoli, led the resistance against the post-war partition of Turkey. In 1923, he emerged victorious against the Allied-backed Ottoman Empire and established the new Turkey. In that same year, a new treaty was signed, the Treaty of Lausanne, which removed the provision of an independent Kurdistan. As a result, the Kurds became a diaspora scattered across mostly Turkey, but also Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Now, America's foreign policy has been to maintain the status quo, and that's fair enough. The world would be chaos if the major powers supported every war of independence. However, the Kurds served a huge tactical advantage in the Middle East. Given that they were spread across the 4 Middle Eastern countries, if any of those countries annoyed America could give support to that country's Kurdish population and let them be a thorn in the side of that country. And that's exactly what happened in Iraq. When the US-backed Israel received opposition from nearly all the Arab states in the Six-Day War of 1967, Iraq couldn't completely participate because it was too busy trying to suppress its Kurds. So when Iraq signed an arms deal with the Soviet Union in 1971, America leapt in to support the Iraqi Kurds. In 1972, US National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger authorized America arming the Kurds and training them in modern warfare techniques. As he wrote, the objectives were to give the Kurds the capacity to negotiate with the Baghdad government and to keep the Iraqi government tied down. Remember that before the Shah was overthrown, Iran was actually a Western ally and their population is primarily Persian and not Arab, and so they supported the Kurds next door in Iraq. Importantly, Kissinger never supported an independent Kurdistan, and in his defense, an independent Kurdistan would be landlocked by angry ex-overlords, but like I said before, the Kurds served the purpose of being nuisances to whoever America or their allies were angry at. Satisfied with their suppression of Saddam's Iraq, the Iranian Shah, with the approval of Kissinger, abandoned the Iraqi Kurds when he signed the Algiers Agreement. This agreement gave Iran and Iraq joint sovereignty over the Shatt al-Arab waterway in return for Iran stopping their support of the Iraqi Kurds. So effectively, America and Iran stirred up the Iraqi Kurds and then abandoned them. Saddam's forces burnt 1,400 villages to the ground and arrested thousands of the followers of Masoud Barzani, the Iraqi Kurdish leader. Unfortunately, this pattern would repeat itself. When Saddam invaded Kuwait in 1990, the Kurds were once again lured in by the US and given an autonomous zone in northern Iraq. George H.W. Bush even went as far as to, quote, encourage people to take matters into their own hands to force Saddam Hussein, the dictator, to step aside. So Bush gave a pretty strong nudge and wink to the Kurds that they'd have support in a rebellion. However, when Saddam hunted down and massacred the rebels, once again America didn't do anything. The 90s also proved to be grim for the Turkish Kurds, who had been seeking autonomy since the 1970s. From 1994 to 1997, the Turks became the biggest importer of US arms, with these arms being mainly used to suppress its Kurds. So once again in the 90s, the Kurds had their hopes raised by America, just to be dashed. Finally, the war on terror would give America one last time to let down the Kurds. There was real excitement for the Iraqi Kurds because the old enemy, Saddam Hussein, was inevitably going to be ousted from the nation. These hopes were dashed when in 2007, Turkey approved border incursions into northern Iraq, claiming that Kurdish insurrectionists had been crossing the borders with US weapons intended for the new Iraqi army. Turkey then bombed Kurdish areas in northern Iraq. Now, earlier in 2003, Turkey denied the US deploying a northern force in their country to advance southward towards Saddam. the divide and allegiances between the Kurds and Turkey would only intensify under the administration of Donald Trump. So I just gave you a very brief history of the Kurds being messed over, but the real question we want to get at today is, what did Trump do and how does this affect NATO? And to answer this question, we need to go back to 2011 with the outbreak of the Syrian Civil War. And this war is crucial for understanding modern alliances, and so it will get its own video another day, but essentially the main thing I want to get at is that in this war there were four main blocks. Firstly, there was the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, and he was supported by Russia, Iran, and Lebanon's Hezbollah. Secondly, there was what was known as the interim or alternate government. These were Syrians who rose up against Assad during the Arab Spring, but were then supported by Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, mainly because the Arab states are in a cold war with Iran and fear the spread of Iranian influence. And these were the main two blocks, but there were also two others. So thirdly, there was ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. When Saddam was deposed and the Iraqi military was disbanded, many of them angrily defected to a radical Sunni movement partnered with Al-Qaeda. In 2013, they abandoned their Al-Qaeda ties and this new movement, ISIS, fought alongside the rebels in Syria. However, the Arab states weren't keen for Al-Qaeda 2.0, and so ISIS then fractured into a third force with its own territorial ambitions. Finally, there were the Kurds who were fighting against ISIS, but also against the Assad regime for their own independence. Unlike the alternate government, they didn't want a new Syrian government, they wanted autonomy from the Syrian government. So, hold up, how was America involved in all of this again? Well, in 2014, America intervened on the side of the alternate government, so on the side of its allies like Qatar and Syria, but this wasn't to fight against Assad, but to instead fight against ISIS, who were conducting terrorist attacks all across the world. So again, this was 2014 and at the end of the Obama era. Following me so far? So 2015 rolls around and Trump begins his campaign for president. And remember, at this point, no one was expecting Trump to even win the Republican nomination, let alone the presidency. And during Trump's campaign, he went on and on about the stupid wars that both Obama and Bush fought in, even saying that Iraq would be better with Saddam there and Libya with Gaddafi there. So he was critical of American intervention in the Middle East, but also at the same time was really strong on ISIS, praising Putin for helping Assad attack them, and blaming Hillary Clinton for creating ISIS.
Take a look at Iraq. She gave us ISIS because her and Obama created this huge vacuum. And a small group came out of that huge vacuum because we should have never been in Iraq, but once we were there, we should have never got out the way they wanted to get out.
So in 2016, against all the odds, Trump won the presidency, and also created the Trump won't win compilation niche, which by the way, YouTube has completely stifled. Like, I don't have strong opinions about American politics, but I do care about watching a smug George Clooney get it completely wrong, and being able to watch that video from 2017 is a hill I will absolutely die on.
There's not going to be a President Donald Trump. That's not going to happen.
But anyway, Trump obviously won in 2016, and though he spoke a strong game of no more stupid wars, he decided that Syria wasn't one of them and didn't pull out. In fact, in 2017, Assad was alleged to have used chemical weapons against the Syrians, and in response, Trump launched 59 cruise missiles at Assad-controlled Syria. So now America has expanded its opponents to include ISIS and Assad as well. So what about the Kurds again? Well, once again, Trump starts getting Kurdish hopes up and starts supplying them with weapons in a bid to overthrow Assad. To the Kurds' surprise, from 2017 to 2018, Trump was hinting at regime change and at least giving the Syrian Kurds hope for autonomy. The cost of pursuing this though was huge. Targeting Assad meant escalation with Russia and Iran, on top of already being in a trade war with China. So in 2018, Trump announced a withdrawal of 2,500 troops from Syria, with the rest to be gradually withdrawn. To add to this, in 2019, ISIS was all but defeated, and its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was assassinated. So the main reason as to why America was in Syria in the first place was dealt with, and in October of 2019, Trump withdrew the remaining US forces from North Syria, leaving an opportunity for Turkey to pounce. So given that most of my subscribers are total detail nerds, like I'm not exaggerating by saying I've been corrected because I referred to section I rather than section II of the extinct Persian constitution of 1906. So because most of you guys are total nerds, you'd remember this news story from 2019.
The long-planned Turkish military operation in northeast Syria has been launched.
And remember, Turkey has an interest in a weakened Kurdish movement, as it has 14 to 20 million of its own Kurds, that's 18% of its population, and an emboldened Kurdish population means more internal rebellion and its own government weakened. So Turkey invaded northern Syria to fill the vacuum that America left, the exact thing Trump accused Clinton of in Iraq. And this was a huge issue for the US. The Kurds had helped America fight against ISIS, and America had led them on with vague hints at autonomy. However, Turkey was a NATO ally and a crucial one, as we'll see at the end. And the US-Turkish relationship had been souring ever since Turkey refused access to American forces in 2003 and bombed Kurdish Iraq in 2007. So Trump did what he does best and started playing 4D chess and said this.
It's like two kids in a lot. You got to let them fight and then you pull them apart. But it was unconventional. But they fought for a few days and it was pretty vicious. And now all of a sudden they're fighting and it's not fun having bullets going all over the place.
As the Turkish invasion continued through October of 2019, 10 European nations plus Canada imposed an arms embargo on Turkey. Meanwhile, America imposed sanctions through steel tariffs and the cancelling of a $100 billion trade deal. However, in response to the Turkish offensive, Russia arranged for the Assad government to swoop in and make a deal with the Kurds before the Turks. The Kurdish commander-in-chief, Mazlum Abdi, said this: "We know that we would have to make painful compromises with Moscow and Bashar al-Assad if we go down the road of working with them. But if we have to choose between making compromises and the genocide of our people, we will surely choose life for our people." The dream of Kurdish independence from Syria was over, and Russia agreed to police the border with Turkey. Trump was yet another US president who led on the Kurds. But this showed a huge issue within the NATO alliance system. Sure, a united defense against Russia is what all the nations have in common, but does securing Turkey in this alliance mean that the Kurds get abandoned by the US and Europe? The former permanent NATO representative for Italy, Stefano Stefanin, said that a verbal warning was all the power they actually had against Turkey. And in April of 2022, Finland and Sweden applied to join NATO in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Interestingly, Turkey was actually the only NATO nation to oppose them joining on the basis of them supporting the Kurdistan Workers' Party. That's the main organisation of independence, and obviously they use warfare to achieve it, including what would constitute terrorist attacks like civilian bombings. Turkey then dropped its opposition when Finland and Sweden agreed to label them as a terrorist group. Now, yes, the Kurdistan Workers' Party is also labelled a terrorist group by the USA, but before 2019, America had routinely shown a lot of sympathy for the Kurds when it suited their interest. So why could Turkey exercise so much control over NATO? Well, look at the map. Turkey's NATO's main entry point into the all-important Black Sea. And as long as Turkey is in such a key position at a time when NATO was proving to be a crucial alliance, the Kurds can't be too hopeful of American support, and this is speculation, but they may turn elsewhere. There are roughly 30 million Kurds living in the Middle East, and so if a third world war to spill over there, we could potentially see an Iranian, Russian, Syrian, and perhaps reluctant Kurdish coalition, or at least a non-aggression pact. Those 30 million have a knowledge of the terrain and some even of US training. And it's not just the non-Western backed regimes that are fearful of Turkey. Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain have all recently expressed strong concern over Turkish advances. If America is insistent on keeping Turkey as a key NATO ally to counter the threat of Russia in the Black Sea, it may affect them in the Middle East. Thanks for watching. If this video has helped you better understand what could happen moving forward, hit that like button. There'll probably also be a lot of Turkish people disliking the video, and fair enough, I haven't really argued your case that a lot of innocent Turks have died at the hands of the PKK, it's just less relevant to what happened with Trump. To continue to get prepared for what may come though, you've got to watch this video on the rise of Putin. If you have no idea what shock therapy or the Chechen conflict is, then click on this video, so you know exactly how Putin came to power. We can't wait to see you next time for our next venture into a fascinating part of history.